Hey, good morning, everybody. This is a great gig for us at Dine Brands. It's literally 6 minutes from the office. Can't say no to that. You saw a bunch of clips of our new office in that film. We moved to Pasadena from Glendale in June, so we're just coming up on a year. It's our headquarters. We call it our Restaurant Support Center. And we have reinvented the office, like many of you have done as well, to invite our team members to come back to work. We are a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday-ish kind of company. We offer a lot of food and beverages and places to meet and gather in a way that we didn't before, and literally turned our office inside out from what it was in the past. So we're thrilled to be here, and welcome to Pasadena. I'm going to talk about our philosophy for what we believe makes great brands and how we think about building really strong brands, because as a franchisor, we're 100% franchised. We have 3,700 restaurants and only one owned restaurant, which is a Fuzzy's Taco Shop in Dallas, which we use as our test kitchen. So for all intents and purposes, we're 100% franchised, and that makes us a brand company, right? We're all about the brand, the story we tell, and advertising. And for decades, if you know our brands, right, Applebee's and IHOP are restaurants where people have come to gather, where families celebrate milestones, where Little League teams celebrate playoff wins, and really a place where for 65 years for IHOP and 50 years for Applebee's and 20 years for Fuzzy's, people have come together and gather. And so that is a really important part of our heritage, and it's a really important part of our brands and our restaurants and our team members being part of their communities. And so as a franchisor, we win when our brands are different, better, and special. I'm a former chief marketing officer. I worked at Starwood Hotels for a long time, almost 20 years. That's Sheraton, Westin, W, St. Regis. And what I was taught there by some really good marketers is that branding all comes down to making your brands different, better, and special, and can they pass that test? And we believe that we have among the most compelling brands that are different, better, and special in dining. And so I thought it'd be helpful to sort of take a step back and talk about what branding used to be, and then catch you up to how we think about it today. Because back in the old days, branding was all about a commercial, the 60-second TV spot. It was pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Brands were built around an iconic personality, a pithy slogan, a great song. But today, brands, and all of us that lead brands, have a bigger mission and more responsibility, and really a bigger burden to connect with our guests, because we've got to meet the expectations of today's consumers, who are definitely more sophisticated, more in the know because of social channels and digital. And so you really have to make an emotional connection with your guests today. And that's not easy. Do you know the brand that people tattoo on themselves more than any other? What's your guess? Harley Davidson, right? And so if you're gonna tattoo Harley Davidson onto your body, you really have to have a passion and an emotional connection for that brand. And so Dine Brands, and brand is in our name for a reason, right, is that each of our brands has a story to tell. And each of your brands should have a story to tell, whether it's your personal brand as a human being, or the brand that your restaurant represents, or the brand that your technology or whatever service you provide to the restaurant space represents. And so for us, branding goes well beyond the advertising, well beyond this month's limited time offer, because everything you do, every touch point's got to tell the brand story. Whether it's the clothing the team members are wearing, the tone of voice, do they greet their guests with hello or hi or how you doing, is a specific choice. The design of the restaurant, the experience on the apps. As we like to say, everything communicates. And as you program a brand, every touch point should communicate. And so strong brands need to have personalities that inspire, because they reflect us and who we are. And everything that we choose to wear, all of my boots are from the same, I got 3 pairs of the same boots in 3 different colors from the same store to boot in New York. because it says something about me, and it says something about how it reflects my personality and what I think is important about me. And so our great brands are not only good storytellers, but they're also super innovative. And they've got to stay innovative, particularly today when consumer expectations are changing and evolving so quickly. I'll give you a slightly off-the-wall example of innovation that I like. Here's a painting. Anybody know the artist? Same guy who painted this, right? But the painting on the right, this is all attitude, right? It's a work that changed everything. It changed his career, right? And it changed the way we look at Picasso, and it made him a legend, right? He gave the art world something it didn't know that it needed, or even that we wanted. By the way, he painted the picture on the left when he was 15, right? A pretty talented guy, but hadn't yet invented who he is and what his unique contribution to the art world was. And so we, like Picasso, have got to give the world something that it can't imagine, give our guests something that they can't imagine. It's an old quote, but one I like. It's like when Henry Ford said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would just say, give me faster horses, right? We can't be in the business of doing that. Here's a more commercial example. 12 years ago, Tide invented the Tide Pod. Now, did any of us really lay awake at night saying, please, please, someone invent a 3-chambered cleaning device, right, that's filled with pre-measured detergent, odor remover, and stain remover, right? No, none of us thought of that, but somebody at P&G headquarters in Cincinnati did, and Tide gave us something we didn't even know that we needed, and they added, and this was 14 years ago, $5 billion to their bottom line as a result. None of us knew we needed that. There were also, remember there were unintended consequences of the Tide Pod? Do you remember what kids started doing with it? Kids started eating the pods, right, which they thought was super cool. And I do remember back then my son was probably 10 at the time, and I was upstairs, and I heard this odd sound in my kitchen of I heard tss, 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 something that was sort of almost frying. And I came downstairs, and he had turned on the pancake griddle, and he was spitting on it, and he was watching his spit boil, which he thought was super cool. And I thought, yeah, my kid would eat a Tide Pod. It made sense. Nothing to do with building great brands and restaurant spaces. But that is innovation, right? And that's what we're all here to do, which is to make sure that our strong brands, like Applebee's in our case, and IHOP and Fuzzy's, are always thinking about what's new and how they tell their story. And in today's world of great change, we would argue that having a strong brand that tells a great story and has a strong point of view is sort of step one to succeeding and winning today. Step two is all about making sure that you've got world-class talent to go with your world-class brands, right? And so for years, we've been talking about B2B relationships and B2C relationships, but in this age of great change that we're currently living in, it's really important to think about B2E relationships, business to employee relationships, or in our case, B2TM, B to team member, which is what we call the team members in our headquarters and in our corporate offices. Because working in a restaurant, as many of you know, has never been more challenging than it is today, especially for the general manager. New sales channels, outdoor dining, third-party delivery, recovering from COVID and all the requirements from that, staffing shortages, retaining staff, and then the explosion of technology, off-premise and on-premise, make running a restaurant an almost impossible job. And if the pandemic taught us anything, I think, it's our obligation to empower our team members to make decisions, to figure it out, and to be accountable for their work, to support their new approach to work-life balance, to help them activate their careers, grow their careers, and achieve their career ambitions. Many of us who work in an office see it all the time, the request for flexible hours, the request for fewer than 5 days a week, the desire to work from home and make sure that we enable that with technology. And like I said, when they do come into the office, making sure that we have a destination for them that's desirable and facilitates work. And so that's why empathy as a leadership style and strategy and tactic, that empathy really, we believe, is a key success factor more than any other to developing great talent and retaining talent, right now. Another quote that I like a lot is from Teddy Roosevelt, who said, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care." And to us, that summarizes, our approach to managing our team members, both at headquarters and for our franchisees who are doing the same thing in the restaurants today. Today's leaders, I think, are successful when they talk about their team members as change agents and as brand ambassadors and as unique individuals. Because empathy isn't just about nurturing your team members, it's about allowing for their full participation. This is another story I like that some of you may know. So in 2017, at the University of Miami football, Manny Diaz was the defensive coordinator, if you're a Miami fan. And he realized that his years of coaching where he just told the guys, do this, or you're in trouble, wasn't working anymore. And so he invented the turnover chain. And so any player who caused a fumble or achieved an interception, when they got back to the sidelines, they got to wear this chain as a point of pride, right? And it engaged them on a very personal level. So the results were 2016, his team had 19 forced turnovers. 2017, the year he introduced the chain, 31 forced turnovers. A completely different way of coaching for him about recognizing that his players needed to feel that point of pride. They liked to brag while they got to wear that until the next guy got it. And so, we've been thinking that to win in the marketplace, you first have to win in the workplace, right? And it's all about our people and our talent. And I know that you all, think the same thing. Because 2024 is going to look a lot like 23. Super challenging. Still facing the effects of inflation, still the effects of our guests on increased prices, still challenging labor environment, still challenging sourcing to some degree, and certainly a lot of shifting consumer expectations, the uncertainty of the election. So what we all have gotten really good at, and I think you all have too, is learning from COVID about how we always have to adapt, we always have to evolve, and we really always have to be agile if we're going to succeed, and that we just can't throw resources against the problems. We really have to be playing offense at the same time that we're playing defense, and that's really important. So examples of during COVID is we really had a philosophy of we're just not going to play defense. We're going to invest in the future so that we can own or win the upswing that will ultimately come. I'll give you an example of that. Our IHOP loyalty program, the International Bank of Pancakes, where you can earn pan coins and you can deposit them in the stack market, and you can redeem your coins for free pancakes and other items within IHOP. It's a great example of investments we made during COVID to pay off on the other side. And so now 2 years after launching it, we're approaching 9 million unique members who've enrolled in it, and it now accounts for almost 7% of our sales. And as you'd expect, the active members come more often, spend more, higher average check, and so that's exactly what a loyalty program is designed to do. And we did that by investing in it during COVID. And now we're adding AI to the program, right? We have a recommendation engine on our app, just like Netflix and just like Amazon. Since adding the recommendation engine, fueled by AI, to our app, 73% of the time that we recommend an item to add to the check, our guests take it. So that's a great stat, and actually a little bit better than the stats for Amazon, which I Googled it the other night. 35% of what Amazon recommends we buy. Netflix, 75% of what Netflix recommends we watch, which is pretty crazy, right? We no longer make our own decisions. And the whole predictive analytics thing became clear to me a few years ago. My brother's a lifelong bachelor, and so he was on one of the dating apps. And my wife and I, who've been married for 30 years, and thought, well, gee, how does that work? He said, well, let me give you my username and password. And so we actually stopped watching television and became addicted to my brother. And looking at the women who what do you call it? Said hello to him, and we were like, we love that one, and he would always say no. And then the ones that he said yes to, we were like, oh my God, that's a disaster. And then my father-in-law passed away. So my wife and I began searching for guys for my mother-in-law. And a few weeks later, my brother called me and he said, the strangest thing has happened. He said, my dating app is now recommending women under 40 and men over 65. And that is exactly the learning engine, right, that we've introduced, not quite that we've introduced to our app, and exactly what Netflix and Amazon and everyone else are doing for us. And that's the power of predictive analytics. So talked about the need for strong brands, talked about our take on developing great talent, and really that it requires empathy in times like this. And the third thing that we're really focused on in this age of great change is agility, and the need for organizations, particularly large ones like ours, to be agile and make decisions quickly and stick with them. Because the world is changing quickly, and our guests and your customers are changing along with it. In my conversations with franchisees, because I'm in restaurants all the time and meeting with franchisees, the biggest fear they have and the biggest concern they have is how quickly things are changing, right? They talk to us less about the menu specifically, right, or the functionality in our app specifically, or what's happening with DoorDash specifically, but they just say collectively, so much is changing so fast that it's even sort of generating a little bit just of fear of change, right, and a little bit of fear of disruption. And there's a couple ways to contextualize that I think are helpful. One is if you just look at the speed with which demographic trends have changed. In 1804, the planet reached 1 billion people for the first time. So it took all of human history until 1804 to reach 1 billion people. It took 123 years for that to double to 2 billion in 1927, only 60 years to double again. And this year, in less than 40 years, the planet doubled again to 8 billion, right? A crazy exponential growth in how quickly our world is changing and all the implications for the planet. And that speed of change is mind-boggling. You can look at it from a technology perspective as well, in terms of how quickly technology is changing. And this idea of exponential growth is hard for humans to understand because our brains can't comprehend it. But an example, it took 110 years for the telephone to reach 1 billion users. 110 years. It took less than 50 years for television to reach 1 billion users. Facebook did it in 8 years. TikTok reached 1 billion users in less than 5. You can think of a zillion examples like that. Your phone today, our cell phones, have more computing power in them than the entire Carter White House did in 1976. That's incredible change, and we all live from the implication of that every day. So disruptor is a big word, right? Disruptor is those of us that can figure out how to leverage this technology, how to leverage AI, how to leverage all the data that's available to us to make a difference in a profound way in the markets in which we compete. Disruptor is not a new word, right? Classic examples, Netflix started mailing us DVDs 20 years ago and put Blockbuster out of business. Airbnb, my old haunting grounds in the hotel space, Airbnb, which was ignored by the CEOs of the hotel companies for years as not relevant, achieved 2 million listings, 2 million room nights in less than 6 years, which was more than the total of Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt combined. They did it in 6 years. Those companies collectively are 300 years old. Those CEOs never saw that disruption coming. But what's really important for all of us, many of us, particularly those of us at Dine that represent a large organization with 3 brands and 400 franchisees and 3,700 restaurants and almost $10 million in system sales is that we can't just let the startups be the disruptors, right? We have to make sure that large companies like ours act in a disruptive way as well and not get buried in our bureaucracy and our process. And we have a position of strength from which we can innovate. And that's why we believe we have scale that we can leverage at Dine. We have data, we have our world-class brands, and we have our 400 best in the business franchisees who are helping us to disrupt. And so we're not backing down, of course, during this time of great change. We're really leaning into some aggressive goals. Particularly we're doubling down on new restaurant development. Applebee's and IHOP are mature brands in a mature category with really big footprints, so you've got to be really innovative to make sure that they continue to grow. We offer small, medium, and large prototypes. We offer, urban and suburban and rural prototypes. We're encouraging conversions, and most recently, we've begun to talk about the work we're doing with dual brands, which you can see here. Dual brand for us is putting an IHOP and an Applebee's in the same box. We have 8 of them now open internationally in the Middle East, in Niagara Falls, and in Mexico. And what we're seeing, as you would expect, is about 2 times the revenue of when you only had a single brand in the same footprint. And that's the key. Same footprint that we would normally build. And what we have is the blessing of 2 brands that are entirely complementary from a day part perspective. IHOP is primarily an AM brand. Applebee's is primarily a PM brand, and then IHOP is an overnight brand. And so when you put the 2 together, you get a fully utilized kitchen and physical space, and thus the 2x revenue. And we're working now to begin to bring it to the US in a couple of cases to test it and test and learn how it works here. And when you think about strong brands, where I started, and think about guest expectations, in the US, guests don't know that IHOP and Applebee's are owned by the same company, and there's no logical reason for them to be together. If you're a franchisee and you own the box, there's a huge reason for them to be together because of the benefit of the added space. And so we have to learn how to explain to guests how this concept works, and we're doing that overseas first and bringing it here. And I tell you that story as an example of how we believe, as a large company that's been doing things the same way for many, many years, we can think of new ways to present our brands to guests in a way that's additive for our franchisees. We're also leaning into our scale when it comes to CPG products, which is a great way to get the brand in front of guests in ways that are not when they're in the restaurant themselves. IHOP has now got IHOP coffee in over 40,000 supermarkets across the country. Last year, when we introduced the coffee with our partner, Kraft Heinz, Kraft is now reporting to us that this is the single fastest growing launch of new coffee in years, particularly among Gen Z and millennials, which is the audience we're trying to hit. And why we're doing this, it's pretty obvious, right? If you drink IHOP coffee at home, then you look for IHOP coffee when you go out. If you, at some day, are buying IHOP syrup in supermarkets, you're going to look for that. And ultimately, if you're buying IHOP pancakes, frozen or mix, at home, you're going to want to eat with us. And so that's a way that we make sure that we're in front of our guests at multiple touch points in their lives, not just when they're in our restaurants. We're also trying to be really innovative in marketing, right? And the way in which we connect with our consumers, and trying to be as viral and relevant and meeting them where they are as possible. Yes, we're still on TV. TV makes a difference in this space, but so does connecting virally. Some of you may have heard of Applebee's Date Night Pass. So we offered this back in January. It was a $200 date night pass. In exchange for the $200, you got a $30 credit each week for 52 weeks. So it was almost a $1,600 value for $200, and it helped us talk about Applebee's as the place where America goes for date night. We sold out. We made them available at midnight. We sold out in less than a minute. We got amazing publicity about that, and we also got some critical publicity about it because there were some who felt it couldn't possibly be real. I got on at midnight plus 3 seconds, and they were already gone. And so we came back and we did it again in February for Valentine's Day. And we offered 1,000 date night passes, same thing, $200 for 52 weeks. This time we learned a lesson, right? You got to evolve and be agile. Rather than first come, first serve, everybody's name went into a digital hat, and we picked out the names of the 1,000 winners and have gotten, again, incredible unpaid publicity from that because every one of these winners is posting when they go to their date night and they have their $30 credit. Our average check is $35, so they're almost covering the cost of dinner 52 nights a year if they choose to come for 52 nights. And at the same time, we're also investing in technology, like the whole industry is, making sure that our franchisees, particularly around takeout, I can tell you that before COVID, both Applebee's and IHOP had about 6, 7, 8% off-prem business. Since COVID, we've settled in at 22, 23%. And so we've done a lot with technology to make sure that we lock that in. We've added geofencing to our apps, AI like I talked about. IHOP has just finished installing brand new back-of-house technology for the POS and handhelds connected to that for the servers in the front. We've done everything we can to make sure that we can meet our guests, where they are, when they want to talk to us, through what channel, and how they want to dine with us. So we call all of this, which is an important part of how we manage and communicate within Dine, big, hairy, audacious goals, or BHAGs. And if you set goals that aren't big, hairy, and audacious, it's hard to think outside the box. It's hard to come up with a solution that's any different than what you've always done. And so we purposely have set goals that are a little bit scary, intimidating, and the answer is not immediately clear because we believe it pushes us to make bigger and bolder moves as a result. The dual brand is one of those items, right? Where we asked ourselves, how can we increase the revenue in a significant way beyond just the 1 or 2% comp sales growth that we might get. Pandemic taught us anything, and we're now a couple of years on the other side of it, is that in this increasingly digital world, in this increasingly connected world, in this world in which our guests are changing their attitudes and their desires so rapidly, you've got to figure out new ways to fit into your guests' lives. And all of those examples that I gave are our effort to try to do that. And the past few years have certainly taught us to expect the unexpected. Right now, if guests are feeling the weight of inflation, then we've got to think differently about value and respond really quickly to that. If dining at home is the best for them, we've got to think about the best way to accommodate that, not only technology-wise, but our relationships with the third-party delivery companies, the way we package our food. Our food, Applebee's and IHOP, it was not invented for delivery as other food categories have. So we've had to do a lot of work around how do you package it, how do you tweak some recipes to make sure that it delivers well when we now have more than 20% of our business is off-prem. And most importantly, at a time when all of our prices are up, including us in full service, our prices are up 20+% to 30% versus 2019. So when people are coming out to dine with us and they're spending more than they once did, it's all about the experience, right? And so for us, we talk about the value that we deliver, great food at a great price, an abundant portion, but most importantly, it's the experience that our team members deliver, and that if you're going to come out to dine, right, it's got to be a special moment each and every time, which brings us back to our talent and how hard our franchisees work to make sure that their team members are delivering great experiences. So if all that sounds like a lot of work, it is, particularly as a franchisor that's working with franchisees to deliver this experience. But the secret for us at Dine Brands is that when push comes to shove, at the end of the day, our job is pretty clear, which is to give our team members the tools they need to make every guest feel special and to experience the best of our brands each and every time. And if we do that, we think we win. And so, I'll wrap by talking about one final story, which is my favorite brand, which is a brand none of you ever heard of, unless you live in Little Westport, Connecticut, where I lived until 3 years ago when we moved here to take on this job. This is Tommy. He's been cutting hair at Campo Barber since 1958, when he got out of the Navy, where he was a Navy barber. And I met Tommy 22 years ago when I took my son, Scott, who was then 1 or 2, for his first haircut. And if you're a parent and you remember how awful that experience is like, I took screaming, crying Scott and I, put him in the chair, and he had, fluids and drool and shit coming out of every portion of his body, flailing and red and awful. And I sat him down and I put my arm across his chest and I said, Tommy, I just need like the bangs and like whatever you can do. You've got about 10 seconds. And Tommy said, Dad, go away. I said, go away? Have you seen what I'm leaving you with? He said, go away. So I walked away and I looked over my shoulder, and 80-year-old Tommy put his arm around 2-year-old Scott's shoulder and he whispered something in his ear, and Scott stopped crying and got his first complete, cute, adorable haircut. Where did Scott and I go to get our haircut for the next 20 years? We were loyal for life. Tommy passed away a few years ago, and he cut both of our hair for literally more than 20 years after that, because he made a personal, emotional connection with me at a moment when it really mattered. And that's what we expect of our team members each and every day. In that 15, 20 seconds, 1 minute that they have with their customer, how can they make that really personal connection that will bring them back and make them loyal for life? And that's how we think about branding at Dine Brands. Thank you. Good to be here.